Hello, welcome back to the Non-Essential Workers Podcast. This is a left-wing podcast covering media, politics, culture, and whatever we feel like. I'm your first co-host, Alex Rashiotis.
I'm another co-host, Aiden.
And I'm Jason Rashiotis, co-host extraordinaire.
We will kick it over to Jason this week to start us off with our news segment.
All right, well, first I want to issue a correction. In one of our previous recent episodes, I declared that Andrew Cuomo had the political gumption to not give in and not surrender, as most Democrats do whenever they're caught in some kind of, PR crisis. But apparently, they got him good. They got him by his big stapled balls or whatever, and he's going to actually resign. And speaking of that, I have two articles that I think speak to the current zeitgeist about just, the climate and what expectations we have on people who are leaders. So the first article is from NPR. The second is from Time. So the first article is, if Governor Cuomo leaves office, which it looks like he will, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul would be next and make history. And then from Time, Gabby Thomas is the Harvard grad and epidemiologist who just won Olympic bronze. Why do you think I picked these two and paired them?
You're making a statement, I guess, about how the media reports on female darlings. I'm not sure.
Exactly right. In one breath, it's like, forget why Cuomo's leaving office. Forget what do we know about this lieutenant governor at all, other than the fact that she is a woman. I think she's a black woman. Just woman history. Isn't this good? Progress. Consume product. Yes, good. History much. It is so nakedly empty. We're not discussing, Cuomo forced to resign because of his unethical treatment of women, which is the actual progress being made. The actual progress of undoing toxic masculinity that's existed for hundreds of years. No, the only thing that matters is that the lieutenant governor, some chick, makes history.
I do agree. I mean, it's not, sadly, the most naked thing you'll see, but it is still a very clear and transparent appeal to kind of id bowl and as you say, a distraction from the real issues. Like the suggestion is that because Governor Cuomo,
sorry, correct. She's not black.
Yeah, I was going to say she isn't black, but let's carry on.
But whatever, she's rich.
Phew, luckily, I wasn't gonna mention that anyways. But I'm in the way. Yeah, it's not. It seems to be framing it like because Cuomo will be replaced by a woman, it somehow like is spitting in the face of him because he abused women. When, as you say, in reality, they're completely separate subjects.
Ostensibly, she's in second in charge and in the office and witnessed him be harassing.
Right.
Should not she also be resigning for being complicit in his arguably crimes?
I would also like to point out that the implication is women can advance when other women get abused. Because Cuomo's abuse forced his resignation, which now means that this woman gets to make history. So really, all you have to do is ride the suffering of your fellow women, and you too can rise to prominence.
We just needed Bush to bankrupt the entire country and start 2 wars to get Obama. Why aren't you happy with the progress we've made?
I mean, because this is really bordering on like more female drone pilots territory, where it's like a person who has nothing to do with the story and who is only benefiting as basically a freak accident of circumstance is making history because of this guy's bad behavior.
At best, has nothing to do with the story.
Yeah.
At worst, as I said, he's complicit in the story.
Right. Could very well be. I mean, we obviously don't know, but it seems possible considering the intimate connections of different high levels of office in the exact same state. So yeah.
Right. It's like saying, "Oh, Mike Pence has replaced Trump. Mike Pence, what a good guy." Like, no, he's also a scumbag.
It would be very funny. It would be very funny if they were like, Trump's impeachment allows Mike Pence to make history as the first mentally challenged
the first
person,
white nationalist Christian.
like I don't know. I don't know. Like the idea that anyone makes history when someone else shits the bed is bizarre to even begin with. I don't care why it would be making history. Like that. There's nothing. There's no connection. There's no like tendons
It's
between
not,
these things.
Kathy Hochul wins runoff election and
Right.
makes history. It's not, passes landmark legislation to make history. It's exists and is woman who's second in charge behind some dickhole.
When the like the Khmer Empire in history fell, the last emperor was replaced by a gardener who fucked the princess, and that
And history was made.
technically that's history. Like this guy rose to prominence because he basically murdered the king and slept with his daughter, and he was just like a gardener. So I guess that's cool. Like, is this like a showing for gardeners? Like, no, it's kind of a freak accident of the decline and fall of an empire.
Rasputin making history. What progress?
Right. So it's to me it's like grasping at a more interesting or more positive narrative in a ridiculous fiasco. Almost like they didn't want it to be too dark, so they want it to be like, this is a story about women. Why don't we say it in a way that seems inspiring, even though it's just bleak?
But to me, this article, because it's trying to be so whitewashed, it totally scrubs away how vicious and dog eat dog our politics is. Our politics like devour the corpses of your friend.
Yeah.
Just get on up, advance, step on their head as you rise up the ladder. It is so like disgustingly corporate and capitalist in its power structure. Of like, fuck him. He was evil. Advance, take his job, kill him, throw him in the gutter. And I just think that's funny. And then the second article I picked is because, as Aiden alluded to, we constantly complain that our culture has too high standards for men, too high standards for women. It's way too aspirational. These are things that no one can accomplish. And so we are presented with this woman who is literally like the most caricature successful person you can imagine. Black, young woman, Harvard grad, epidemiologist, and she's a fucking Olympian.
Now, I'm going to assume that she won Olympic bronze in epidemiology. Because otherwise, what the fuck
Why are
is
we
this
being
title?
told that? Yeah.
What is this title? You would, if it was like Olympic bronze in like high jump, that should really be mentioned.
I'm pretty
Because
sure
otherwise,
she's a field athlete.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying is it's confusing its terms intentionally to like jam pack more signifiers, as you're saying in there, to like about how virtuous and good she is. It's like, first of all, if you were, someone with no physical ability whatsoever, but you're doing good work in epidemiology, that's good enough. You don't need to win bronze. You don't need to be doing these other
No,
things.
she's
These are
also a
unrelated
world-class
things.
sprinter.
Yeah.
She won bronze in the 200-meter run, and holy shit, she ran it fast. And she came in silver because she was in the 4x100 relay, so the entire U.S. Olympic team won that silver. But the point is, like, this is what Time Magazine's like. Be this, everyone. Be this literally impossible to replicate standard. These are the women we want to have to promote in the world. It's like, these people are so set for success anyway.
If you're not curing all diseases while also participating in the Olympics at the highest level, you've really fucked up in your life, and you should feel bad. You're bad, and you should feel bad.
At Tokyo, while winning bronze, cured COVID. Like,
If she really cared about epidemiology, you'd think she wouldn't go to the Olympics during a pandemic. I'm just saying.
That's an interesting story. Last year when the NFL was going to start up, there was a player for the Kansas City Chiefs who was a doctor, who was like, "I'm not playing this year. I'm going to go be a doctor and help people."
Right.
And people are like, "That's amazing. We love you so much." And then he the next year, I don't think the team renewed him. I'm not sure, but they're like, "We can't deal with pussies like you. We can't give you another contract." I'm not sure if that's true though. It's funny though. Okay. Aiden, what do you think about that insane standard that this headline is?
Yeah, I mean, I've been staring at it, thinking about it while you guys have been talking, and honestly, I have no problem with celebrating someone who is, despite being a standard that not everyone should be held to. Certainly, it's still a success story. I don't know her background, but as you say, she's a woman of color who has managed to not only become a epidemiologist, which I assume involves advanced degrees, and win Olympic bronze. That's very impressive. I don't think we should be celebrating being a Harvard grad anymore, though.
Exactly. I was just gonna say, but Aiden, she went to Harvard. Where all the monsters of the world go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. And I hope she's not a monster. I hope she's a lovely person. But Harvard has a very sterling reputation when it comes to its ability to produce, as you say, horrible people, to be
Ghouls.
a machine that somehow maintains this reputation of being the highest level, the highest standard of learning in not only America but the world, only maybe rivaled by Cambridge or Oxford. And yet, so many people who go there only get in because of connections and privilege.
Or just pure wealth.
Going to like the Kennedy School is basically a state and true place for horrible people to rehabilitate their reputation and then get appointed to some president's cabinet. It's yeah, maybe remove that from the headline and this would just be a blasé thing that I would kind of raise my eyebrows at and move on. But it's time to retire Harvard, I think.
The Olympics might actually be the least offensive thing that you could do after graduating Harvard. Like, that's probably the safest bet. Everything else is, if you get into public policy and any chance, there's probably there's probably a good chance that you fuck something up. Just being honest.
All right, everyone. Well, if you thought you could get into Harvard, don't worry, you can't. From The Hill, coming soon. America's own social credit system.
Oh my god.
And an article by Gizmodo. Citizen launches a $20 service you can call to call the cops for.
Oh, this ghoulish app, yeah.
What the fuck?
Like, because calling 911 isn't easy enough. We need to privatize this more to enrich some scumbag. The reason I paired these, I think, is a little more obvious than the first two. In that, like, America is so disgusting in terms of how we treat our neighbors and how we exploit each other on a daily basis, to the point where it's not only commonplace and normal, it's now like a business idea. It's like entrepreneurial to exploit each other and ruin each other's lives.
Was anyone having trouble calling 911? Is there a person in America who's like, I can't do this. This is beyond my capacity.
I obviously don't know for sure because I haven't read the article. That's the whole point. But I get my idea for this is like, live in a high crime neighborhood where the cops take an hour to get there because they hate you. Call this service and pretend to be a white woman. Pretend to be a Karen who'll get cops to show up in 5 minutes to solve your problem.
Okay, but if you pretend to be a white woman and you're not, then they'll shoot you on arrival. So that doesn't really work.
Yeah.
So and even besides the fact that, like, you're basically creating like a regressive tax on the function of security. Like,
yeah, exactly.
People who desperately need the police to show up for like a crime are not usually thinking like, can I afford this? Is this a thing that I can afford a service for? Like, this is all, of course, even assuming that the police are providing a valuable service, which usually they're not. But let's assume for the moment that you actually need them in one of the rare instances you need them. I don't think you want to make that an economic decision. That should probably just be a thing you can do.
Don't you think it's a little strange they chose the word citizen?
No, because I already know what that is, unfortunately. Citizen is the revised version of a previous, even more malicious social networking app, which was just like blackpeopledocrimes.biz. Like, it was just like, it was.
What are you talking about?
Citizen is like a company / app service.
No, I think this is. Oh wait, I thought this meant like a person.
No, Citizen is the name of the service.
Hang on, let me verify this. I'm not sure this is correct.
No, that's true. Yeah, that's the name of the app service.
Well, that's even more disgusting than I was imagining.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do know what this is. Yeah, it's a disgusting app that's basically a rebranding of a previous proto-fascist app, which essentially
about, like, neighborhood security.
So it was literally called Vigilante in 2016, and it was so vicious and so obviously like race. It was basically just like asking people to commit hate crimes. By the very premise of what it set up, because it was letting people constantly do all this like snitch app shit where they're like, I see a black person in my neighborhood, I'm afraid.
They're inching away from Trump. Now you can just use it to call the police instead of rat on your.
Well, right, because what happened was the police got angry because they're like, no, we need to do the hate crimes. We can't have our hate crimes outsourced to the general public or we'll be out of a job. So the police basically said, if you need to have, people of color abused in your neighborhood, you got to go through us because we're unionized. And we're
through official channels.
Yeah,
right.
We're not going to accept scabs like fucking, someone who's going to pop a teenager in the back of the head because he, was wearing a hoodie. That's bad for our business. So we need to make sure we have a monopoly on brutality, and therefore vigilante had to be transformed into citizen. And citizen is just how you get the nice cops there so that they can do it for you. This is the mellowing down of the explicitly fascist version.
All right, well, now I've been informed. Thank you.
Yeah, it's
And
real
it somehow worked. I thought it was just some dude who's like, I've got a brilliant business idea.
Oh.
Pay for police.
Isn't it great when the article you pick because it's bad is worse than why you picked it?
Oh man, I'm naive,
Yeah.
I guess.
The Nextdoor app, which is just like supposed to be a sounding board for members of different neighborhoods, is already just this without the connection to cops directly built in.
Yeah.
Which is an unsettling, I think, commentary on how suburban neighborhoods think. And
All right, well, maybe I'm being too harsh on Gizmodo. Maybe they were, because Gizmodo's like a pretty cool tech website, and maybe they were saying like we should be concerned about this. So Gizmodo keeping up with the fire. I don't know if you guys heard about this in the news last couple of weeks. People thinks that COVID's going to lead to a legitimate zombie outbreak. So so from Gizmodo, I Am Legend screenwriter forced to tell anti-vaxxers his zombie movie is fake. So I don't know if you guys have seen I Am Legend, but in the premise, Will Smith is a doctor and he's trying to cure cancer, and he comes up with a vaccine, and the vaccine turns everyone into zombies. It doesn't matter. It's not like trying to make a big political statement. It's just a mechanism to convey the story.
Sure.
But so people are like, this breathtaking true story is why I'm anti-vax. And so the guy's like, it's a movie, you fucking idiots. And then following up on that from CNN in the political op-ed section, I didn't expect a Nicolas Cage movie to be the voice of this moment. I was wrong. And this is in reference to a new Nick Cage movie where he's like a chef and he loses his truffle pig. And he just goes on like a friendly little journey to look for his pig. It's not very violent, or it's not very scary or action-filled. It's just like a malaise, like calm but depressing film about a guy trying to get his pig.
Man, I would have believed that it was Weatherman. It was just a disgruntled guy going to kill someone with a bow and arrow.
Well, yeah. Weatherman's kind of similar. But I just think it's funny that everyone's like, how do we best filter the information of the day through shitty movies?
It is telling of our current political moment that someone who writes screenplays for a movie has to go to the general public and like, please don't believe what I write. Like, please do not confuse fiction and fact. Like, I know it's kind of obvious and passé at this point after 4 years of Trump to be like, hey, turns out truth and facts are different than complete wild conspiracy theories and distortions. But we are in such a ridiculous moment that you almost have to periodically remind people of that, because there's no filter anymore. Everyone's just saying such wild horseshit that if every now and then someone doesn't come along and is like, hey, 90% of what you're hearing is horseshit, then people are going to get confused who even didn't want to be conspiracy theorists. They're just like, what am I hearing? Like, what's going on? Like, if the random person just kind of holds their, licks their thumb and holds it up to the wind, they're going to hear a lot of conspiracies.
This one's especially funny to me, though, because, like, this movie came out, and it was a big blockbuster. Like, this was a giant box office success. And most people in the general public saw it. And were like, wow, that was a good fiction movie. Good fiction action movie. Now, obviously, there's problems with it. It's not that good a movie. But the point is, like, this is well established to be fiction. This is not some never before told story. Some about some documentary about some secret lab doing bullshit. This is a fiction story. You can't confuse this for real. It's not possible unless you're actively, intentionally deluding yourself, or just like trolling. And the fact that this became a big enough issue that, like, as Alex said, the screenwriter had to come up and be like, guys, it's not. Like, relax. It's almost like when the Pepe guy came out. I was like, guys, my frog is not a fascist symbol.
Right.
Please stop. I don't know. I find it funny when the artist has to come out and be like, stop being retards. Stop turning my art into weird right-wing politics.
For those of you who give a shit about things like cultural appropriation, I will point out that this article is also cultural appropriation of Haiti on 2 different counts. The first count is that zombies, the zombies are a kind of a Haitian historical mythological construct having to do with voodoo and having to do with the reanimation of vengeance-seeking bodies. And the second way in which it's Haitian cultural appropriation is it's talking about the utter collapse of functioning politics in our society in the face of natural disasters.
Brutal.
Oh God, yeah, because they
it
just
was-
got hit
yeah.
by another earthquake.
It was actually just a joke. I wasn't actually giving a serious
Okay.
speech
But
about
like,
that.
but it's just like with Wendigos, like all the other people who aren't white have all had their cars stolen for horror fans. Horror is cool. Horror is universal. And zombie stuff has been. I'd argue there's way more zombie fiction that's non-Haitian than Haitian. Like that was just an original early voodoo shit that's been totally co-opted into its own tropey genre. But I get your joke, good joke, But all right, let's move on.
I see your joke and raise you mild amusement.
Any thoughts on a Nicolas Cage movie about a guy looking for a pig and how that speaks to our political moment?
I was no, not at all. I was surprised. I was surprised to hear you describe it as like a pretty chill movie because I saw the trailer for it last week. Because how could I not look at the trailer for a movie just called Pig with Nicolas Cage? And the trailer is framed like Taken, like it's framed like a really,
it's bullshit.
But that's really funny to me.
They're trying to go on like the Mandy. Like,
yeah.
This is an acting. Although that movie was trash too. But the point is, like, Nicolas Cage is wild and crazy and violent. But this movie's not. Like, there's maybe 1 or 2 fight scenes that he gets his ass kicked. But it's really just about like a depressed chef who retired because he loves his pig, trying to like function. And he's in like Portland. He's not in like somewhere scary.
If you return the pig, that'll be the end of it.
Exactly.
If not, I have a certain set of skills.
Your ass is bacon.
Try and get the pig back, I guess.
Yeah. I'll kill you and cook you just like I would of this pig.
I'll kill you and myself.
I read a little bit of this article, and the person was stretching so hard to be like, it's almost like the "I'm tired" joke. Like, man, we're just all so fatigued and exhausted, but like downtrodden, and like life is just suffering, and like we're dealing with COVID for a second year, and nothing works properly, and Biden sucks, and Trump was horrible, and we can't do anything as a country. We all hate each other now, and this movie makes me feel like that. I just thought that was funny.
So everyone needs a pig.
Give it a strong recommend. Everyone go see Pig. This week's podcast has been sponsored by Pig.
By the Pork Council. Like,
we all have like heard about or understand like the feeling of being desperate to find hope in any dark situation, and this is just such a perverse transformation and twisting of that we have so many people now that are just desperate to find like proof of negative conspiracies and outcomes. Like they need real reasons or convincing reasons that prove that the world is horrible. Like they so much. So
in fact, it's a total violation of basically the burden of proof. It's a total as a country. Like we've now totally violated basic logic. If you make a claim, you have the burden of proof to demonstrate that your claim is real. So people saying, tell me the zombies aren't going to come from vaccines, are trying to prove a negative. They're trying to say, tell me it won't, prove it won't happen. And it's like, that's not how literally the universe works. That's not how logic works. That's not how putting positions forward works. If you have a position, you have to back it up. I can negate it by saying, just give me proof for your claim. I don't have to prove your claim wrong. And I think that, that's certainly what the first article is kind of about. Like, I don't have to prove to you that my fiction movie won't actually make zombies. You have to prove it will, and then come talk.
I have an interesting question. Let's assume that like a given percentage, a non-trivial percentage of the population, at least of the United States, but I assume even in many other countries, because we've seen similar stuff in other countries, is so dumb and so gullible and so easily affected by fiction that if you put out a film or any significant product that has a fictional narrative in which a clear public good becomes a public harm, my question is, do you have a moral responsibility to account for the incredibly stupid way in which these people will react to it, even if you haven't really done anything wrong? Like, if you know that there's dumb people who will basically kill themselves or others based on their wildly conspiratorial way of interpreting data, and you know that the data that you're putting in, while perfectly reasonable to a rational person, might get them to act that way, is that a moral hazard? Do you know what I mean?
You do not have liability to that. But I do understand what you mean. This is exactly what the media tried to hype up when that Joker movie came out. Because they're like, the filmmakers have a responsibility to deal with the toxic white men who shoot up schools after this. And it's like, one, no. Two, the movie has nothing to do with that. Three, the movie's good, and it's about how lack of social services leads to people having mental health problems. And four, it was all premised on a false concept, which is that the Aurora shooter in Colorado loved the Joker. He had no identify with the Joker at all. He just happened to shoot up a movie theater while the Dark Knight movie was playing.
I want you to imagine alternative reality, right? I want you to imagine a not too inconceivable alternative reality, where instead of 1 or 2 movies like this, there were like 50 movies about vaccines causing horrible things to happen, right? And suddenly, the public isn't necessarily so stupid looking. Maybe they're just absorbing a zeitgeist that has been established by popular culture, which is what people do. So, like, if there had been an enormous number of films that were all pushing as a fictional premise something negative about vaccines, I don't know that would be so innocent anymore, right? And the reason I bring it up isn't because that's going to happen.
Zoom out though. Every modern zombie film uses this as their basic trope to start out the premise. In 28 Days Later, a great zombie film, the premise is fucking environmentalists let out some monkeys some doctors were doing crazy shit on, and the doctors, mad science, led to zombie outbreak. The movie that Aiden and I watched recently, World War Z, the premise is pretty similar there. Like, almost all zombie fiction that's not mystical anymore has to use some kind of science.
Yeah, they're either mystical or scientific, but they're not specifically drilling home like vaccines are the problem, right? Like, if there were a whole bunch that were using vaccines, you know. And the reason I make this analogy is because, you know, there's for instance, like 1,000 movies about how Arabs are terrorists and Muslims are terrorists and they're dangerous to America, right? And any individual one watched by any rational person might go, it's just a Hollywood movie making just a funny point, right? But when you take them in aggregate, it creates a culture of extreme Muslim, anti-Arab hatred in the culture.
No, it doesn't create that. The causation's backwards out.
It feeds into the causation is dual directional. But all I'm saying is that, you know, with one film, I don't think you can say the person has any moral responsibility necessarily. Like, okay, they made one film in which vaccines were a danger. But if this became like a more normal thing, like if we normalize a bizarre conspiratorial premise through enough sources of fiction, have we kind of contaminated the waters? Is kind of what to me is an interesting question.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, and my first instinct is that you couldn't really like objectively condemn anyone for making a film of this kind unless you came to be able to prove that they had malice or malintent, or say that they were like funded by some anti-vax movement.
Even then, you're allowed to have malice and malintent.
Yeah, exactly. I think if I were a filmmaker, yeah, it would be the same kind of feeling I would have about making any kind of film as you made the connection to, that kind of celebrates U.S. imperialism or points to any kind of group as a timeless villain very broadly in ways that have seeped into the American psyche. It's something that I think is worth considering and being conscientious about, because while, yeah, I feel like it's a gray area, and like truly condemning people is probably stepping too far into stamping on expression and kind of changing or demanding that we change the way that we view art. You know, art in aggregate does have a very real, tangible effect on how Americans think, how the world thinks, like as we just talked about at the beginning of this conversation about zombie movies and such.
Yeah, and also bear in mind, I'm certainly not calling for censorship. Like, I'm not saying, is this something we
Oh
need
yeah,
to legally
yeah.
regulate? I was just asking about a moral hazard. Like, should they be themselves thinking like, should I do this? You know, like that was the nature of my question.
Yeah.
U.S. censorship or something.
I certainly didn't mean to suggest that.
Well, I mean, the government can't censor it, but people can censor whatever the fuck they want. Like, people fundamentally misunderstand the First Amendment all the fucking time. You can go boycott a movie, and that's not censorship. Some company can fire you for your beliefs on Facebook. That's not censorship by the government. The First Amendment only protects the government infringing upon your speech. So
Right.
everyone can suck a giant dick about people canceling each other. That's allowed. That's free expression to shit on other people.
Right, but I guess
And
all I'm saying
completely
is,
make
should,
insane conspiratorial movies.
should the movie makers themselves say like, maybe I should not, maybe I shouldn't do this same trope and
They don't care. They're
reinforce
making it for
a
money. They're
negative
making
thing.
what they think is going to make money.
I guess.
All right, let's move on. The stuff that's uncontroversially insane. I've got 2 killers from Slate, which is one of my favorite websites because of the insanity. All right. So, first up from Slate. My best friend says she's allowed to cheat on her husband as reparations for gender inequality. And if your brain hasn't exploded yet, or just seeing like, oh, this is just a woman who wants to cheat. Also from Slate. Help. My daughter is marrying a white man against my wishes.
I mean, before we go nuts on this, the first one's bait, right? Like the first one's obvious bait.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
99.99% of people do not believe in the assertion of this article that anyone thinks that gender inequality is solved by cheating.
No, keep in mind. These are articles that are not like opinion articles. These are dipshits writing in to Slate's advice column people, and there is no way to corroborate or verify if they are in fact real. But the assumption and the
right, they could be complete fiction, yeah.
Sure, but the assumption is that given the details provided by the writer, most of these are real, and most of the time they are real anyway. So let's assume from the premise that if you're some dumbass American reading Slate, you believe these to be genuine.
Right, and my point isn't even whether they're genuine, it's that the implication is that these are somehow even remotely normal things for a person to believe. Whereas they're essentially straw men of the thing they represent, which is to say, let's say someone says, I'm a feminist and I support gender equality, right? And someone else is like, well, I read an article where someone who supported gender equality wanted to cheat on her husband. It's creating a straw man of an idea that is then ridiculed in itself.
Well, hang on, not necessarily, because Slate is very not economically progressive, but every other thing progressive. They're very Democrat progressive. They love having their advice columns be like talking down. In fact, for the second article, I read a little bit of it. Like the article writer the advice giver goes ham on the guy for being a hypocrite and being bullshit and judging a guy before meeting him and all this crazy stuff, being a deadbeat dad, which he admits to in the article. But the point is, Slate actually loves to do moral grandstanding. And so I think if I had to guess in the response for this first one, they were like, you're this is bullshit. Obviously, she knows it's not for reparations. It's obviously not someone who wants gender equality. They love representing that shit. So I just thought it was a funny line. And once again, I don't know who's misrepresenting who or if anyone's representing anyone really, but just taking at face value, I think there's meat on the bone.
First I would say that I don't really think you can be that progressive if you're not also fiscally progressive. But that's tell
that to fucking Hillary Clinton and every.
I know you were.
I would love nothing more than to do that. But sure,
yeah, that would be a lovely opportunity.
Okay, but you both acknowledge there are millions of Americans who think they're progressive and don't know what socialism is and what capitalism is.
Yeah.
Totally. Or frankly, what progressive is, since that term's basically been denuded.
Like
too.
They identify as okay, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They identify as progressive and think that means supporting gender rights, supporting brown people, supporting Latinx. They think that means all this other surface level shit that we all talk about all the time, not fundamentally redistributing wealth and property and resources and how things are made. They think just talking about all the impulse stuff is being progressive. So you have to keep in mind that like 40 million Americans believe that, if not more.
Of course. And that's because that's much easier to understand. And for some people, they intuitively come to that because they understand the difference between treating someone like shit and denying them rights and treating them like another human being and giving them equal rights. And when you get into ideas of economics and property, people's brains turn off. But going back to the articles, yeah, I mean, the first one, it's amusing I think that it's about on the same level as the second one, honestly, which is both seem to be kind of talking, just trying to like, they honestly read like comedy pieces to me, which is to say, they both kind of give outrageous premises, and I have no idea. As you know, did you say that you read the second one, Jason?
I read a little bit of the advice for each of the headlines, but
Okay.
I think yeah, go ahead.
So what tone did you get for them? Is it like kind of like
Actually, no, I don't remember for the first one, but for the second one, I read. But I think Alex is onto something that, given what we know about Slate, it's very odd to see what both could be like Stormfront headlines, because these both fall into extremely conservative tropes.
Yep.
Like, see the black fathers being just as racist, and see the woman who wants gender inequalities being just as sexist. And so, obviously, you know, it's Alex is keen to pick up on that. But what I'm saying is, they're obviously good headlines because they're catchy and insane, and they grab that like guttural something's wrong instinct in us that makes us read.
I don't know how many people have had the misfortune / comedy goldmine of watching the 60s film Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
Exactly, yeah.
But this is a film which, if you get a chance, you should watch at some point. You know, buckle in. And it basically details a white woman who wants to marry a black man. And basically, it's 2.5 to 3 hours of whinging from every single character in the movie, other than the white girl, about whether she can marry this man. And
Sidney Poitier, of course.
Right. Well, so the premise is that she's from like a good liberal family, a good progressive family, who would have preached.
It's just Get Out without any of the modern shit.
Well, Get Out has a lot of other things going on, but who would have preached progressive values, but then when it comes to their own actual daughter, are like, I don't know if we want this to happen. You know, it was trying to explore hypocrisy. It was trying to explore talking, you know, the kind of like neoliberal thing of talking out of both sides of your mouth about wanting to do the right thing, but not really doing the right thing. But the movie is really wild because it spends 2.5 hours assuming that the audience knows why interracial marriage is bad, without ever proving it or explaining it, without ever making any sense of it, without ever like getting into the weeds. It's just a bunch of characters going like, well, you know why. You understand.
Yeah, maybe it just knows its audience well. Maybe it knows it's like,
you know, there's literally a line in the film, and you have to hear it from the film itself, but the innocent waif girl who wants to marry a twice her age doctor black guy who's like perfect in every possible statistic. He's like an MMO character with max stats. He has max stats in every score, is my point. She turns to the camera when the mother or something says like, you know, you shouldn't marry him. She's like, why? Is it just because he's a Negro? And it's like, yeah, really, basically, that's it. There's nothing else. There's no argument. There's no explanation. But I know it's a long diatribe, and the reason I was getting into it is a huge subcurrent of this movie is the black servants in the household and the black family of Sidney Poitier, who both show up and are like, you shouldn't do this. This is bad for the black community. How dare you marry this lovely young white woman who loves you and who you love, right? And so the entire movie is framed as if every single person in the film, which basically includes poor people, neoliberal progressives, and black people, noted conservatives all, don't want interracial marriage to happen. So if this movie was supposed to be what it billed itself as, which was like a beacon for toleration and moving the ball forward, I don't think it succeeded, because it basically depicted every modern component of the Democratic Party hating on interracial marriage. And that's what this feels like to me.
And fast forward to today, we have an identical headline just from the other perspective.
It's been more than 50 years, too.
Yeah.
It's been 50 years, and we're literally, that headline could have been in the film, because that's literally what one of the families was doing. And I for people who think racism's over, take another look. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, well, if you thought racism was over, you haven't read the Boston Herald lately.
You're correct.
All right.
I have not.
From the Boston Herald. Some guy.
I should be so
I'll read
lucky.
The second one first. Mayor candidate John Barrows says cities shouldn't be afraid to use eminent domain to tackle development issues. And development issues is usually just code for like bulldozing poor people's houses. And then second article from some guy named Backer. Critical race theory is just about money, power, and revenge. Which I thought the revenge part segued so nicely with what we read about Slate.
Is critical race theory the like subtitle of Django Unchained? Is that the confusion here?
Because he lands so many criticals hits.
Yeah,
I mean...
he might be thinking of that.
What y'all think?
Fucking incredible.
What's up with Boston? What's going on in Boston, everyone?
Yeah.
Third article from Boston Herald. Boston's for the Irish whites. Go away.
Yeah, basically.
Irish and Italians.
Yeah, cities are really afraid to use eminent domain. They hate it. They hate using it. Folks.
It hurts me more than it hurts you.
Cities should not be afraid to turn homeless people into mailboxes at every possible opportunity.
And turn homeless people into homeless people.
Yeah. It's the homed person to mailbox pipeline that you've all been waiting for.
Yeah, I mean,
hey, this guy went to Dartmouth. John Barrows.
Never heard of the school. I honestly, I thought CRT had kind of started to fade from the talking points of, I assume in this case, quote unquote moderate to conservative pundits, but
Boston never forgets.
Seems like they're still railing on it, or at least maybe mail takes a while to get to Boston. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, the first one's honestly really funny because it sounds like this guy heard about CRT and then like immediately decided that he had to like save the world from it or something.
Let me give you the secret sauce about what it's all about.
Yeah, it sounds like he got inspired to write a screenplay for like a James Bond conservative.
Do you think this vaccine's about curing cancer? It's about money, power, and zombies.
Exactly. You can add that to any issue, and it makes it honestly hilarious headline, even if very misguided and stupid. Yeah, I'd be curious to read a bit more about this mayoral candidate. I don't know anything about John Barrows, but I what a wild thing to say.
Everyone talks like Alex Jones now. Like,
He's
why do you need to say
anyone.
money, power, and revenge? I'm just saying, like, you couldn't just say, like, the normal weird conservative horseshit way of putting this would have been something like, multiple academics come forward to say that critical race theory has certain problems in its structure and needs to be reviewed. Like, they would have found a way to coax it in like a plausible, believable, kind of middle of the road sounding way of packaging neoconservatism or whatever the fuck they are. Instead, they're just like, the globalists are coming and the critical race theory is going to kill your children. It's like, this is insane. Like, it's obviously insane. They're only talking to themselves at this point, right? And it really shows you how much polarization has happened on like a individual siloing into political camps, not like actually in politics where we're all basically just right-wing psychos, but in terms of the population, everyone's just going to their website to read their cranks, because otherwise this article wouldn't make any sense, because articles used to be to try to like convince people of things, and now they're mostly just to jerk off. Like, they're just for their
like
own
an article
that
the White House is releasing is to disseminate information that they want out. Or an article written by some investigative journalist to expose information that they want out. This is not an expose. This is not some kind of here's what critical race theory is, like in reality. It's just, I want to rant about a thing because I'm mad. Read my drivel.
Do you guys think if it's about reparations?
I mean, there are certainly arguments made in CRT about like reparations is possible. Here's how it could be done. Here's why it deserves to be done. But whatever, I'm not pro or anti helping. I'm pro reparations for everyone who's poor. I want reparations for everyone. I want to reorganize the world economy. So you don't have to push it. I'm not gonna be. I'm too scared to talk about this. Like, fuck it. Everyone deserves better money.
Other than revenge, this is just what politics is.
Right, money
and power is what politics is. That's like saying these radical leftists want to use power to change the world in a direction.
These leftists want to win elections. These scumbags.
Right. These people want to govern.
How dare they?
Like what? Like, yeah, no shit. Like you think that all the shit that goes on right now is not about money and power?
No, but Alex, the Democratic Party's not about governing. They're about just sitting in chairs.
Do you think that anything that the United States foreign policy has been since 9/11 has not been about 9/11 and revenge? Like, fuck, fuck's sake, like these people know they're full of shit at this point. They're just like they got their job writing like hateful articles because everyone's basically Alex Jones or John Cass at this point. And they're just gonna sit there writing horseshit because like this only exists because there's like a group of 60 to 80-year-old men who want to shout at their grandkids and nephews so that they can use this article.
Yeah, I just like the way that this is framed. Some guy ranting about like how dare people articulate a different worldview than mine, and then right under that is the city of Boston would like to steal your property, and it's cool. Don't you love having the power and authority to steal other people's property? Oh wait, I thought we're supposed to be against that.
Yeah, how could minority communities dream of having more money and power? What would they ever need that to combat with that money and power? Shift one headline down. Oh, stop being buried beneath the concrete of new high rises.
There's a lot of manipulations going on in the second one. I almost don't want to give it short shrift. The fact that they put it on the candidate instead of owning that this is obviously the ideological position of the Boston Herald. It's like, we don't want you to bulldoze black communities and poor communities and homeless people and just throw them into like, piles of needles and death pits. No, that's John Barrows. He wants to do it.
Well, once again, I don't know if he's Democrat or Republican. I'm assuming he's a Democrat because he's black, but I mean that could be totally wrong. He was the chief economic development counselor for the city of Boston, and he worked as the executive director of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative. So I don't know, and maybe the point is this is a bipartisan issue. Eminent domain is a bipartisan issue.
The fact that he wants to do this tells you everything about his ideology. I'm sorry. But the other thing that's really manipulative about this headline is they say development issues without clarifying what that means, who that affects, what that is a euphemism for. Like they don't talk about homelessness, poverty, the minority communities in a largely white city.
No, Alex, it's all about zoning.
Right, like they're making it sound like it's like we just wanted to build a mall and we had to knock down a abandoned barn or something like that. That is the most disgustingly neutral way of putting what is almost certainly like an anti-humanitarian policy, and they know it.
Why they have the phrase development
they know it is. That's not subtle. Yeah, like that's police talk. Sorry, this is a development adjacent shooting. Sorry, that's not even slightly.
Let me just say, I just did a quick Google, and he worked in executive liability protection for.
I think he was a lawyer and
for a property insurance company. So, if anyone who doesn't know, that basically means that his job was helping ensure that executives and upper management could never be held liable for any kind of misdemeanors or consequences born out from actions that they were responsible for. So you judge for yourself what kind of person would get involved with that kind of racket.
Politicians should not be afraid
to act boldly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because from Politico, Biden on Afghanistan. Yeah. Not my problem.
Yeah, I saw this one. Oh man, that's actually probably the favorite thing he's ever said. If that's true.
Not my problem.
That is such a big dick move. That is such a big dick move. Like, folks, if it was Trump, he would have been like whinging and whining, and why are people yelling at me? And Biden's just like, hey,
get over
it. Get fucked. I'm out of Afghanistan. Suck my ass. It's like, why? Like, he doesn't care at all. He's like, I'm gonna be dead in 5 minutes. I don't give a shit. It's really incredible. It's incredible. Like that is the most cavalier dismissal. Like even people who have been like dedicated anti-Iraq war, anti-Afghanistan war for 20 years, like myself. Even I was like, oh man, it's looking really bad in Afghanistan. He's like, eat shit, Mac. Like, all right.
I love it. It's such a simple headline.
Go Biden on this one.
I love it. All right, let's follow that up with my next one from, where is this from? Yes, good old friends, The Atlantic. I'm sure at some point we'll discuss the Iraq war in more detail, but I just thought that was funny. From The Atlantic, Cornel West on why the left needs Jesus. Y'all need Jesus.
Okay, but before we get going on this one, it should be pointed out that Cornel West is actually a democratic socialist. So this is not a pure right-wing attack. I guarantee you this is a good faith statement by him. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not a good faith statement from the Atlantic.
No, of course not. No. They are absolutely trying to use him for their purposes. But Cornel West is a good dude.
Yeah, he has in a single headline become a token, basically. But I do agree, yes, with that, Alex. Yeah, that's
So, for example, to your point, Aiden, Cornel West recently left Harvard, and in his letter, he's like, "Y'all are evil."
Yeah, it's like I
So
can't.
I like Cornel West. I just thought it was a funny headline, and I wonder what people would take
Yeah.
away from it, and maybe we could discuss Cornel West a little more.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to read.
And the kind
article.
of religious left who view Christianity as a way to raise to those socialist ideals.
Yeah,
Whereas
it's
in my
interesting.
view, you can use all that, but to me, it fundamentally is an obscuring of the truth. So I'd like to get to left stuff from a scientific worldview, but I understand people who want to get there from a religious worldview.
I think as long as you get there, that's the goal.
Discuss.
Yeah, I think it is interesting that a lot of leftists, at least that I've seen or in rare cases talked to, feel that religion is in some ways at least incompatible with modern, at least leftism. But I think that that's often an obscuring of the truth, because what Americans especially are so familiar with is kind of large institutional Christianity and evangelism and such.
Right-wing Protestant born-again Christianity or
Which-
Catholic kid-raping Christianity.
Right, which
Oh, I'm saying it.
oh my God, he's saying it. Which it's true, but those are not representative, of course, of the entirety of Christendom or other religions like Judaism and
Yeah, just
Islam
religion at large.
and whatever. So
Let's not start on Judaism.
I certainly won't. I'm in no place there.
We'll get to it later, Alex. And I mean another episode.
I would like to point out, I mean, it should be noted for the audience that Jason and I are both half Jewish. It's not that we're anti-Semitic. But
and on our mom's side. So we're both official.
Yeah. So,
I'm Irish, so I'm innately Catholic.
Yeah. You've got the same experience, just not from
You're
the
the
same
class
cause. Yeah.
Catholic.
You got the same experience of being brutalized by history, but just for different reasons.
Thank you.
But the point I was going to make is, the other day we were talking about whistleblowers, and one of the best articles on the topic was by Chris Hedges, who is a Christian. I think he's a pastor, but he's a really prominent. Yeah,
I don't like him.
he is a prominent left-wing advocate on almost every issue consistently, without fail. Like his sort of what we would normally think of as like secular humanist principles shine through way beyond his sort of Christian, trappings. And I think really the same thing could be said about Cornel West. I mean, Cornel West is Christian, but he's more a socialist than he is a Christian. And he's more a left-wing academic and scholar and advocate for people in need than he is a Christian as his core identity. I think it's, you can be both things, but the thing that has shown through for these kinds of people is the thing that is critical to these movements, which is to have a heart and to give a shit about humanity, right? And I just want to say, like, yes, I'm an atheist. I think we're probably all atheists, but the point is not whether or not religion is true. The point is whether or not the question of religion is an important enough thing to stop people having solidarity with one another to fight the good fight against the actual enemies that we have. And I just don't think that we can make that our big cause.
This is why I wanted to discuss it, because my take is that I don't think the article is saying we're fighting about religion too much to unite on the left. I think this, the more central is you're saying, how do we explain humanism to people who don't know what the fuck it is how do we get people who only understand morality through religion to understand what being secular and being a humanist is, and then mobilize that the same way we'd mobilize any political movement. But I also just think it'd be interesting to discuss this idea of, does the left need Jesus? What would that mean? What would that entail? What would that look like? How would we get buy-in from other people? And I just, I'd be keen to see what you guys think about it.
I think probably the first thing that comes to mind for me anyways is going right off of what Alex was saying, which is that getting people to recognize the real threat and to participate in a leftist movement is the most important thing. The outcome is all important. And so probably the most obvious thing is kind of the acceptance that is so commonly associated with Jesus, that he is forgiving and kind of takes all who have good intent. And I think probably overcoming the gatekeeping elements of, at the very least, online leftism, which unfortunately is the most optically obvious and apparent form of leftism in our modern age. Being forgiven of people who might have started as moderates, God forbid, or more often liberals, and accepting their kind of genuine, if sometimes misguided, desire to move left, and helping them understand the differences that they need to recognize and accept to continue to move left, which I think a lot of people find difficult, because we all who have moved left feel pretty strongly about the injustices that people who think of themselves as progressive but are still much more towards the center or even conservative sides kind of just abet day in and day out. But the truth is we need more allies, and so people who want should be brought left if they're willing.
And I mean, to me, this is a very similar to the other conflicts within the left, which is to say, the left is one of the most fractious places you can be, because basically everyone has a different interpretation of what a better future looks like. It's a lot easier to agree on keeping things the same. So conservatives, generally speaking, have an easier time allying with each other, even though they're all self-interested, than leftists tend to do, who all have slightly different versions of what the future looks like. And I'll post this, for you guys. This is one of the rare instances where you see like efforts to join between different ideological factions. This is like a communist anarchist solidarities poster. And if you can get anarchists and communists to work together, then I can work with Chris Hedges. Like, you've got people with such fundamentally different views of
until he says something like abortion should be illegal and the woman should be thrown in jail.
But he doesn't.
Which
right?
he may
That's
not
the
say.
thing, right?
Well, sure, but I'm saying, it's like tradcats, like the whole discussion that's been had many times. Like, there's gonna be inviolable lions. And the problem with Christianity, and the problem with any religious system, is that it provides a framework that's not entangled with reality. So it's very hard and messy to parse that if their fundamental assumptions are not real, or at least not tangible. So it's very hard to, because there's going to be some weird blip, some weird thing's going to come out of left field because of some theology, and it's going to be like, well, we can't cross that bridge.
Yeah, but the people who are wedded to the religion of capital are far more dangerous to me than the religion of Christianity. Like, I can find far fewer points of disagreement with, say, Hedges or Cornel West than I can with any atheist libertarian.
I know.
So like, I think when we're picking our battles as to who we tactically make alliances with on the left, because again, the left in the United States is very weak. I mean, it's stronger than it used to be, like for the last 50 years, but it's still very weak. We're not winning elections exclusively by being Puritan, like pure to only far left, activists. You have to win people over, and I think I would much rather win over what are essentially good intentioned people with their heart in the right place, but who are still to some degree connected to traditional sources of belief, no matter how rational we may think they are, then I would try to win over people whose heart is fundamentally not in the right place, and who are always going to be self-interested and greedy and just shitty people.
Here's what I'm trying to say. I don't think this can be politically won really either way. And because I know that anything will be used cynically by those in power still. So they'll be like, oh, you can't listen to us because we're three white men. All right, well, you can't listen to them because they're not religious. Oh, you can't align with them because they're not X, Y, Z. What I'm saying is there's no actual path to uniting this other than like revolution, in my opinion. So there's no like, well, we just got to get that enlightened, Christian lobby. They're not going to help win. There's no winning.
But what does revolution mean if you don't have, with what majority force? You still need people to wield those guns in this revolution, and so if you haven't brought enough people over to your side through whatever coalition building,
the 95% of people who get exploited, that's a big enough block,
right? But of them, many will be religious, right? Like that's just
I don't care. It shouldn't factor in at all.
Well, exactly. Well, that was my point.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, I think
we're all in agreement.
What I'm saying is, it's not from like but not from like a win election standpoint. It's not. I think we're past that. Like election, there's no election. Stop with elections.
Well, let's put aside the question of tactics. this is put aside the question of tactics, right? I think whichever way you go, whether you're a democratic socialist, whether you're a communist, whether you're whatever, right? Whichever way you go, the strength of the left wing is being a majoritarian movement of the working class. And that definitionally means you will be working with people who hold religious views, whether in a revolution, whether in a democratic process, whatever. So I think we don't even need to get into tactics. No matter which ones you're going for, you need these people. You just need, you can't get around it. It's not a union when half the people are missing, right? So I just think that that's the realistic approach, no matter how secular we would like it to be, for any viable left wing project of any tactics used.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, and in my mind, I wasn't even thinking as far as tactics in the case of this conversation, whether revolution, whether democratic process, or general strike, whatever you're talking about. Yeah, just need to build a power base.
I see the inverse is true also for conservatives. Like if
Mhm.
you're John McCain or his heirs, you don't care if a Q guy is also raiding the Capitol. Like their interests are fundamentally aligned. The same way everyone on the left's interests should be fundamentally aligned.
Yeah.
Obviously, anytime anyone takes power, there's going to be petty squabbling about what to do then. But my point is just, I think religion's an interesting space to discuss here because I agree that the left needs more soul and spirit and enlightenment and humanity. I wouldn't say it needs more religion or Jesus.
Well, I also agree with that. I don't think it needs any. But,
Right, exactly. Because to me, religion is its own pseudo-governmental power structure to coerce people into doing things. It's not like an empowering, here's how we do good works projects.
I mean, if I was writing the article instead of Cornel West, and obviously Cornel West is more religious than I am, which is to say at all, but if I was writing the article, it would have been why the left needs everyone, including those who believe in Jesus, which is a slightly different argument. I almost guarantee that Cornel
Alex,
West is saying...
this is not an article. This is an interview, and it's not him articulating that point.
No, I'm pretty sure that, because I've heard him talk on this a lot, and I'm pretty sure his point is going to be something like, a lot of the energy of rallying, the African American community is in the churches. A lot of the energy of rallying Hispanics is through the Catholic Church. A lot of energy of rallying, white people who are still Protestants or whatever is through their respective more liberal congregations, and the community building aspects of religion can then be put to work building unions and building political projects and whatnot. Because he's basically a democratic socialist who wants to use all the available tools to create community and organization and solidarity, which again is, I think, a perfectly reasonable perspective to have, but it's only really reasonable to the extent he thinks it is, because he doesn't view Christianity in as negative and detrimental a light as we do. So he's simply not seeing it as toxic to the movement. I think he's like 70.
How old is Cornel West?
I'll look him
up. All right, so the reason I bring that up is because this interview is actually a great read. I strongly recommend everyone who's listening to this read this, because Cornel West is great.
He is 68.
Everything he's saying is pretty boilerplate, but it's accurate. But the reason I want people to read this is because just like we parse these headlines to read between the lines to where we're carefully trying to be manipulated and guided, the interviewer in this interview is ridiculously biased. No single mention of Christianity on the right. No mention of it's all just, well, what's wrong with the left? Why is the left not religious enough? Why are there weird new Calvin? It's all just, why is this your problem? And it's no discussion at all of the other side.
How could the left have done this to religion?
Exactly. That's exactly how this entire interview is phrased. And Cornell does his best to just be like, "Shut up! I'm gonna talk about socialism and Jesus and how." Which is why
it's an Atlantic article and not like an Intercept article.
What this reminds me of is that article you shared with us like a month ago at this point, Chase. The op-ed, I think, was it from Wall Street Journal, about basically the guy complaining that millennial and younger Christians are bogus Christians.
Yeah.
Because his complaint was basically that younger Christians,
you have to be a psycho right winger to be a real Christian,
are only guided by the tenets of humanism and compassion, that they're not committed to the more conservative elements of the text and the traditional elements of Western Christianity. So
his argument was, if you're not a biblical literalist or a psycho modern day Christian who's like a Mormon or a Baptist, other Baptist, you're not a real Christian. That was his argument.
Yeah, which I think that argument basically is encouraging in the context of what we're talking about here, because it means that there are plenty of American Christians who are probably, at least in their heart of hearts, through the lens of their faith, still on the right path. Anyways, I think we've talked about that enough. So what's the next one?
Yeah. So speaking of, there's no real connection. I just want this is funny.
Yeah.
So a source we've not heard of from before, but it's about something you might have all heard of. Winston Marshall, who was a member of the band
Mumford and
what's
Sons.
that? Mumford and Sons, yeah. So from a Journal of Musical Things, why did Winston Marshall leave Mumford and Sons? Let's hear him explain things. So do either of you guys know the background of this?
Yeah, he was like the banjo player who turned out to be anti-vax. Is that right?
Not merely that.
Wasn't he like a white supremacist or some sort of insane political view?
He started tweeting like Andy Ngo stuff. And he's
Yeah.
like, you know what's better than being a musician? Being a right-wing chud on the internet. You know what's better than making hundreds of thousands of dollars touring across the world and making people's lives happier and better every day through my music and art? Yelling at libs on the internet. Posting. Posting is bae. Posting is life.
But it's not just posting, it's like posting against assholes who don't believe in white genocide.
All
like
Winston Marshall wants to do is post, Alex.
It was like far-right psychotic stuff. It wasn't even just like regular conspiracy stuff. It was really out there.
Posting that exposes he's a right-wing psychopath.
Yeah.
So what do you all think? Would you give up a career in making nice, pleasant music to be a psycho?
To fight Antifa? Absolutely.
Yeah,
I've heard that they're coming for my daughter, my wife, my mother. Yeah, no, it's not much to say. I think it seems that brain rot does not stop with the non-entertainment people. Yeah, I mean it's an interesting question. I think though, because we know that, and hopefully you know as well, listeners, that many of these far right and conservative pundits online don't really believe everything that they say. They're brought in that direction because of the enormous opportunity for money and career connections in it. But this is an interesting case where he was almost certainly already making quite a hefty sum of money and seems to have gone that direction anyways. So I don't know.
He does it for the love of the game.
Yeah. Do you think he did this because he just like felt so strongly? Or do you think, I mean, you can make an enormous amount of money in the right wing sphere. Or do you think he also saw like a career opportunity that he thought was viable in comparison to Mumford and Sons? I haven't kept up with Mumford and Sons since their whatever radio hit, 10 years ago. I don't know how they're doing these days, but
what was their big hit? I don't even know who they are.
Little good songs.
Little Lion Man was their first big hit, but
yeah, it's a good song. But the point is, Aiden is certainly on something that like it's not just that he's trying to live like his authentic life of being an evil person. He was so upset by the fan and band reaction to him being a conservative. He's like, all right, I guess we have to cleave this relationship. I can't now just be in the band conspicuously in the back while everyone on my team's like, yay, we're big D Democrats, while I'm like a psycho in the back being like, I'm fucking Trump and Jones. So he felt like he was ostracized. Like he can't go back. The truth's been spilled. It's out of the bottle. It's not going back in. The toothpaste out of the tube.
Like maybe 1% of their fans probably knew his name as the banjoist for Mumford and Sons. So
I think he's like the co-founder, though. I think he's one of the brothers or something. He's not like some random dude who just joined the group. I think he helped found it.
I'm just saying, it's usually like the singer and maybe another band member who might be dating like an attractive model or something who people normally know the name of. So at the very least, maybe in this career, like people will, he dreams that people will one day say Winston Marshall, at some QAnon rally. I don't know.
I mean, there's a certain archetype of sufficiently successful right-wing men who then want to go full crank.
Yeah.
And you see this with like the Mel Gibson, the Kevin Sorbo, there's a lot. I don't even want to go tell the names.
Yeah, that's not.
But the point is, there's a lot of people who are just kind of like, I've done my thing. I've made enough that I can comfortably coast, or am fabulously wealthy, depending on the situation. Time to get really fucked up. Like time to now tack to like the most extreme crazy thing because no one can stop me.
The heroin ain't doing it anymore.
Yeah, and
Gotta
it's
go for that good stuff.
all these people, and the irony is that usually, despite having either tremendous or relative success, they immediately have just like pure grievance politics. So it's like,
Yeah, just nosedive.
why we wealthy, successful white male celebrities have it bad seems to be the consistent trend for these guys, and I don't know what that's about. I don't know if it's like they didn't get the hot models, as you say, that they thought they would get. I don't know if they thought they couldn't get speeding tickets anymore. Or if they thought that, like, I don't know, this
Here's
was
the
just
funniest thing about him. This is not some American idiot who's had his brain melted the whole time. He's British. He's from England. His name is Winston Aubrey Alauder de Balkan Marshall. This is not some fucking, like, low-class person who's stupid. He just became crazy. His fucking wife divorced him last year over this shit. Like, he destroyed his entire life for the love of the conservative game. He has no fandom anymore. He's not in a band anymore. His wife left him. Like, he's been cucked by the universe because it's not even about, oh, woe is me. It's all been like, Antifa's a threat to freedom. Like, it's weird. It's so out of left field. It's not even self-serving. It's not even self-interested. It's just crazy and humorous.
Yeah, it's pretty insane how you can see all these, like, I mean, all these sounds too general, but how you can witness a number of like Trump rallies in countries outside the U.S., Canada, Britain, and even further abroad, and as you have just pointed out, grievous concerns about Antifa in countries where Antifa has had no real public presence at all. It's just like a complete bizarre transplanting of American conservative concerns into any other conservative movement in a usually Western European context. But yeah,
I
even
have a great quote for you.
Please do.
Good. No, finish up.
I was just going to say that it I think just pretty clearly highlights how it's as much about the momentum of hysteria as it is about the actual foundational concerns.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I have a quote that actually feeds into that, which is that, like, he's not even just like, here are my views. So, quote, I have a little bit of frustration with the politicizing of music. Let that irony sink in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind when artists are political, but I think politics is fucking complicated. It's different from 3 years ago when we were doing promo for Wilder Minds, some like movie or something. We weren't even asked about politics. People didn't care. But now everyone's got a fucking opinion. Everything is politics this, politics that. It's a massive change. So all this is just from Trump era. He's just mad that Trump drove like libs crazy. And now he's like, well, now I have to be a psycho-conservative because I can't stand the libs being mad.
We're right back to Meghan McCain, complaining about nepotism, right? Like that's where we're at with that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Because this guy's literally doing the very thing in the very article that you're reading.
Also, you know he's an idiot because he got this started because he started reading Jordan Peterson, and that's when we got into politics.
Oh, fucking great! I wish he'd just turn into
he
a
started
fucking
learning
lobster.
about politics in 2018, where he's like, "Oh, I like Jordan Peterson. I'm going to invite him to my band studio." Like, this is the level where conservatives are at right now. Pop psychology is their guiding principles.
Kids these days used to be able to listen to Kermit the Frog, and now all they could do is listen to Jordan Peterson. It's very dangerous that it's changed in this way, and they don't have male role models that are good for them like Kermit the Frog anymore.
It doesn't sound like that, Alex.
That's what he fucking sounds
all
like.
Right. Okay, so we're done
my
with
room,
that,
and
idiot.
now I realize I should be a fascist.
Yeah.
All right. If you thought that last article was meaningless, just wait.
Yeah. Okay.
This is from Big Think. Epiphenomenalism. We could just do a whole article episode. Epiphenomenalism. One of the most disturbing ideas in philosophy. All right, class. I'd like everyone to Google that term and tell me what you think.
Yes, sir. I know what an epiphone is.
It's crazy.
What?
We'll have to try and explain it for the audience.
This is some really nerd shit. And I say that as someone who studied political philosophy at a doctoral level. Like, this is, I mean, I didn't get it eventually, but point is, I studied it at what would have been a doctoral level had I succeeded. This is insanely, like, up its own ass about, like, whether or not your body makes your brain do the things that you're doing, or your brain makes your body do the brain thing that you're doing. Like, no one gives a shit. I just like to point out, like, no one gives a shit about this.
I saw this article, and the reason I thought it was interesting is because we all throw around terms like black pill a lot, and it's funny because it's just essentially talking about nihilism, the idea that, like, nothing can change, nothing matters. Obviously, the world is fucked. Obviously, we're going nowhere after we die. Obviously, we're on a tiny little blue dot that's spinning in space, and nothing really matters in the end. There's no ultimate, gigantic universal truth or principles that matter to anything beyond our tiny little temporal lives. And that, I guess, news like, you like that shit? Read some of this. And so I got this article from Big Think. Big Think normally is like big pop neoliberal ideas. Like, at Big Think, we're talking about big ideas like getting rid of trains, or like big stupid dumb stuff that they think is cool. And just seeing this was like, oh, even the people who are very positive are like, oh no, we're losing, we're all becoming Eeyore. Oh, now epiphenomenalism's here. Now ideas don't do anything because they're not physical. Oh. Just for a quick definition so people know, if they were too lazy to Google it. Epiphenomenalism is defined as the view that mental events are caused by physical events in the brain, which is true, but have no effect upon any physical events. So just because you use your brain and come up with ideas and make words, that can't impact physical reality, which is already demonstrably false just by you listening to this podcast. Behavior is caused by muscles that contract upon receiving neural impulses. Neural impulses generate input. It's bullshit, basically.
Yeah, the brain is a physical
people
thing.
Are scared of this idea.
It's like, I mean, there are many ways to poke fun and poke holes in this idea, but yeah, the brain is also like a thing that physically exists and has chemical.
Makes sense of that image.
So I'm looking at a counterclockwise arrow that leads into a large circle labeled universe that
you don't have to actually describe it.
Subsumes a smaller circle named brain, which then points to a large square that's labeled Mindverse.
Welcome to the Mindverse.
You need to enter the Mindverse. This is the PhD level snorting its own farts equivalent of we live in a society.
This is just Gorka's dissertation.
Like, this is literally, you have a brain which is physical, therefore thoughts. You think you're thinking in there because your brain exists. How could you be thinking if your brain isn't made out of ether? Like, what? It's misunderstood. It's like saying because there is a calculator, there cannot be math. Because the calculator is a physical object and math is a theoretical concept.
But once again, the reason I bring this up is because I think in some ways this relates to the politics of our day and the way that the media class feels. They feel like their words don't have impact anymore. They feel like they used to be the kingmakers, and now Trump comes on and shows his ass in front of the media, and he wins. The media feel like they're epiphenomenal. They have words, and they say their words, but they don't see the impact. In fact, they see the opposite of what they want happening. And I just thought it was funny that the person's tagline on this is one of the most disturbing ideas of philosophy. Like, oh no, it's happening. We are less powerful than we used to be. We time to panic and create insane philosophical frameworks to explain this to ourselves.
I want a philosopher. I mean, I don't, because it's going to be very stupid. But I want a philosopher to explain to me how the mind and Mindverse are not in the universe. Like, when you're thinking, do you escape reality? Like, do you escape the fact that you are constrained by the environment? Like, what the fuck are they even talking about?
Once again, this is people who can't. They just can't rationalize. Oh, by the way, Aiden, that's from Sebastian Gorka's dissertation on terrorism. It actually makes more sense. But they just can't understand that, like, the brain makes your mind. Your mind is chemical processes in action. It's not that complicated. But for people who are like, but where's God? Where's the soul? Guess what, bitch? It ain't there. There's no Mindverse. Deal with it. We're in a physical universe.
I wish this was apologetics, because at least then I know what the fuck they're talking about. This is that kind of shit, because like there's a whole lot of stuff in philosophy that's like, you know, did your brain raise your hand, or did your brain notice that the hand was raised when the brain sent a subconscious message to do the thing? It's like, no one cares. No one cares. Like there's probably 20 or 30 faculty at a handful of, you know, at least American universities who have like a meaningful stake in this argument. And that's it. The rest of humanity doesn't even understand the argument and will never understand the argument. So I think that this person, it's almost like that thing. It's like, you know, the missionary goes to the native and says, please convert. And they go, you know, would I have gone to hell if I never knew about this? And they go, no, that wouldn't have been fair. They go, then why did you tell me? Right? Why would you tell the world, other than those 20 to 30 faculty, about the most disturbing idea in philosophy unless you wanted them to be disturbed? Because they'd never know otherwise.
Well, exactly, because this begs the question. Exactly, this begs the question: why was this article written? What do they think? What information does the writer think they're conveying to everyone else?
It's obviously on one level just like clickbait, but even besides that, if it believes its own premise, it's evil. Right? Because if it believes its own premise, it is actively depressing and ruining the minds of the people reading the article. So either it's bullshit or it's evil. I don't know. I feel like a lot of our politics can be summed up that way, but it's certainly literally true in this case.
All right, here's my final pairing, and I went for as salacious as possible. From the Daily Beast. She quit being an ICU nurse to make 6 figures on OnlyFans.
Oh yeah.
And not only do humans agree, but robots agree. From the Side Post, deep machine learning study finds that body shape is associated with income.
Oh shit.
Oh really?
Even the robots know that hot people have privilege.
Being hot is good?
But the robots know now.
Now the robots are horny.
Are going to pump out a bunch of hot cyborgs and androids, and they're all
truly
going to make good income.
We are
all going to make 6 figures on OnlyFans.
Horny computer scientist manages to create robot that is also horny.
No, it's not horny. It's studying. Never mind. Whatever.
No, but basically, because it has discovered the value of shapeliness.
But it's not making a judgment call.
It is enabling horniness at the very least. It's doing. Yeah. It's working towards the good cause.
It's just proving that humans are horny. Very.
Yep.
And it now knows that because it deep learned it. It deep machined it.
For the nurse, yeah, good for them. You know, ideally, everyone likes this except for extreme conservatives. Libertarians approve. We approve.
I don't like it.
Okay, explain.
Can I? So, I don't like it for very different reasons.
Sure.
This is a black stain on capitalism, that it is more profitable to be essentially a nude model on OnlyFans than to be an ICU nurse who saves people's lives every day. It is society's fault that what is more rewarded financially is being essentially a sex worker than being a doctor or a nurse who saves lives. That is not her fault. And, you know, I don't hate the player. Good for her. I hate the game. I hate that we live in a society that encourages this. I hate that we live in a society that financially rewards this and even creates the avenues to allow this to happen. I hate that we live in a society where she paid so much money to get an education, to become a nurse, to get all the training, to all this hard stuff, to learn all about the cleanliness, all the craziness, deal with all these sick people. And she says, fuck it. I'll show my pussy because it makes more money. I'm upset and mad that we have essentially... Not that she's free to do whatever she wants, but that we tacitly encourage this in a societal sense.
It turns out that when you have an incredibly bad healthcare system, even before a global pandemic, and these people are on the lower end of the ranks even within that healthcare system, it's going to go bad for them. They're not going to have a fun time.
Oh, no, exactly. No, I'm sure her life in the ICU was miserable. I'm sure the last 2 years pushed her over the brink. And I'm sure COVID was a massive impact in that. I'm just saying, This should never have happened. The opportunity for this to happen should never have happened. ICU nurses should make way more money. They should be put under less stress. There should be more of them, and we shouldn't encourage economies of just like men masturbating in corners and paying money for it. I don't think that's productive. Well, produce something, but not societal well-being.
Yeah, I mean, once again, another thing that is purely a function of how broken the American healthcare system is. If we had a functional healthcare system, then there would not be an incentive structure in which someone gets better paid to be a webcam model than they get paid to be a nurse. Though I guess in this case, I mean, if you saw what the woman looked like, she probably could have figured out she could have done this in the first place.
I know, she's crazy.
That's neither here nor there. All I'm saying is, first of all, being a nurse is already a good profession that should be well rewarded because it provides a social good, and it is not well rewarded because it's the United States. And two, sex work should not be stigmatized for the people who do it or treated as the ridicule butt of a joke when massive systemic failings are the reason this is happening, not an individual being horny or exhibitionist.
Right, because the article is salaciously saying, look what she turned to. Whereas I'm bemoaning that, not that she could have turned to this, but that she was essentially forced to. And that this was the more successful path for her.
When you consider that like a third of the country are refusing vaccination and making it so that these people's lives are in danger just by working in a hospital on a regular basis, and they've been basically in crisis for a year and a half because of the utterly pathetic ability of the United States not only to be prepared for this, but to have the industrial capacity to fix it when it occurred, we basically have a situation where being a nurse in an ICU is a very, very hazardous profession. It's like being, a lumberjack or a crabber
on an
or
oil
something.
rig or something.
So, like, suddenly this woman who presumably signed up to do a job that helps people as a social good, knowing it wasn't even going to be the best paid, now is like, oh, I could be killed at any point. Yeah, fuck that. Why shouldn't she sit in her bed at home, quarantining, jerking off, and getting a good salary? Why should she not do that? Like, that's the perfectly rational thing for her to do as an individual in the circumstance in which she was placed. That's not even like a moral judgment. That's just the logical consequences of events that have occurred. So, like, again, any framing that's like, oh, has like moral failing, or she's this is her.
Well, I don't know. The Daily Beast loves this shit. I'm sure they were happy about it, but
Yeah.
I thought it was funny to pair with the machine learning. It's like, yes, you will make more money. You can hire a machine to tell you if you're hot enough to make money on OnlyFans.
But I mean, it's
a funny pairing.
It's not even restricted to this. Like, do you know how many people end up doing like amateur porn just to pay for college? Like, we're in a situation where people are turning to sex work because they can't afford basic human services that should be available for free because they don't have a functional government.
Right, but this is what I find rich. When people who are like, we want, like big Democrats are like, we want more women drone pilots, and I paid for college through sex work. Like, there's some incongruity in how our system treats women.
I mean, like, give it 2 years. Give it 2 years. There'll be an article that's like, woman turns to sex work to afford the $20 she needs to call the police.
from the Citizen app. Has to give a quick blowy to get the cops to show up.
Because that's where this is going. Yeah. Woman works 6 different forms of prostitution to afford Easy Pass so she can go to college through a highway.
To me, this is just a very obvious contradiction in how our society says it treats women and says it rewards women for being good workers and wanting to join the working class, and how women actually have to get by.
And also, and this is even another angle, it's probably not usually what we talk about, but these kinds of websites like OnlyFans are also exceptionally similar to almost every other industry in which there's a tiny elite that make a huge amount of money and almost everyone else is barely getting by. So once again, and this is a common trend in almost every one of these articles, it is a completely unrealistic implication that if you, the reader, are in a similar situation, you're like a fairly attractive person who is in a bad job, that you can just hop on OnlyFans and make 6 figures. That's not going to happen.
It's another lottery article.
Yeah. Once again, maybe 2 to 5% of people could get enough income from this to afford rent and food and all the other necessities of life. Everyone else on there is just making kind of some side.
But also, they have to be super hot. The robots have confirmed.
Right. So it is a completely unrealistic escape valve for an already fucked situation in the first place. So once again, it's promoting not only a dumb solution, but a not realistic solution. We can't all cut our hands.
And just trying to make you feel bad in this first place about how hot this chick is and how awesome her life will be now.
we will not all be able to shadow our hands in the shower. We will not all be able to become hot Instagram models. That there's a limit to how much these things can work. And it makes about as much sense as everyone saying, well, if you work hard enough, you'll get promotions. You can't have a company that's 100% CEOs. No matter how hard everyone works, it can only be so many elites, because then you get too top heavy and it stops being a functional structure. No matter what happens, your job is shitty, not because you didn't work hard enough. Your job is shitty because people are being bad to you and withholding the value of your labor. It has nothing to do with how hard you work. It has nothing to do with your moral character. It has to do with being exploited and tolerating it. And any article that's like, no, the problem is that you don't have enough gumption, you're not enough of a disruptor, and you're not enough of whatever, it's all horseshit. And it's always been horseshit, and it will continue to be horseshit.
Well said. What do you think, Aiden? Did my twist as to why I'm not okay with it make sense to you?
I had a number of things that I wanted to say, but I think they all got covered through both of you throughout the course of your opinions on the matter. I would just say, I think that obviously sex work is valid work, and honestly these days, probably all days,
You say is God's work?
essential work. I'll say that too. It's God's work. Christians, you can also get
Jesus
in on the sex work. Don't be ashamed. You can jerk
OnlyFans
off.
needs
Watch
Jesus.
people jerk off.
Jesus didn't shit on Mary
exactly.
or whatever. Who was the person who he was like, whoever
Yeah,
cast
don't
the
cast
first
the first stone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Christian mingle, Christian dingle, whatever you want. I think
Jesus goes from being a miracle worker to jerking it on OnlyFans.
I mean, have you seen those figures on crosses? He is buff as hell.
He's also packing heat. All right, let's discuss something else.
Yeah.
All right, so I mentioned in the last episode or a couple ago, whatever, that there was this very interesting article that I mostly liked because it had funny art of these kids, like cartoon kids with masks being terrified. But it's an interesting article from the Wall Street Journal. It's called "The Case Against Masks for Children." We're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive discussion on it because the author is very interesting and makes a whole wide range of claims, some of which on their face make sense, some of which on their face are totally ridiculous and laughable, and some in between. So we've all read it carefully. It's not just going off the hook of the hard headline. And so we're going to discuss. Now, obviously, we don't want to bombard everyone with COVID information, COVID news. We know you get it enough anyway as is. But how we treat our children is pretty important. Now, the fact that none of us have children doesn't mean we aren't, not that far away from when we were kids ourselves and maybe have our own concerns about medical decisions that were made for us or by our parents. And so it's important. It's important that people understand, their kids have views and opinions and feelings and they matter. And their safety also matters tremendously. So we will discuss.
It should be noted also that I looked up the two authors of this, and they don't appear to be right-wing cranks. They seem to be legitimate physicians with good background.
Yeah.
So I don't think that at least the author's original intention was to help the Wall Street Journal push garbage. I think they probably are writing it in good faith, at least.
But I mean, they submitted it to the opinion. That doesn't mean the Wall Street Journal is putting it out in good faith.
Yeah, I guarantee you that the Wall Street Journal is not putting it out in good faith. But the authors seem to have been. So at least we can engage with the article as its own article, as if it's not just a troll. Because it might sound like a troll, honestly, if you didn't know who was writing it. Like the idea that you're articulating a position that 50 million kids should not be taking precautions in schools sort of sounds like a troll.
All right, so where do you guys want to
start? There are quite a number of points, counter arguments, and arguments that these two authors put forward in this piece, and some of them I think can be countered fairly easily because just the facts have changed since this article was written and published.
Keep in mind, it only came out
things like
August.
Yeah, it's still
8th.
recent. August 8th is when.
Not even.
Like he kind of talks about briefly as one of the supporting points for why it's kind of hypocritical almost to force mask mandates on kids when adults aren't taking COVID seriously. Up to that point, like he talks about how teachers have universally refused to accept like vaccine mandates. That has changed now. The largest teachers union in the country has said that it is on board with vaccine mandates, as well as a number of smaller ones across the country. The idea that I found it interesting that they I guess talk about how there's not really much evidence about how much we should be worried about kids contracting COVID, when even before it arrived in America, there was news and evidence that it was more severely affecting kids through all the many cases that we got to see in India. And we've already seen over the last 2 weeks a number of articles come out saying that it is both affecting more children and more often severely affecting children in hospitals.
And maybe that's just the Delta variant.
Although luckily,
then again, that's still our fault for even letting that happen.
No, that's
also,
exactly
it's
what
still COVID.
It,
I mean, that's still COVID.
Right.
Like, it still counts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is the Delta variant, but as Alex says, it's still COVID. But,
yeah, I mean, I want to start actually, for my piece at least, with like the things that I thought were good in the article, because that was the part I was more surprised by. Because this is a Wall Street Journal article articulating a horrible public policy, so I do want to at least give them some points, right? And the first thing I would say is, having now spent a year and a half in quarantine myself, yeah, masks suck. I hate it. Hate using them. It does in fact suck. Like, if I wear a mask for a couple hours when I'm going out doing shopping or whatever, it's like I feel strain, I feel hoarseness, eventually I feel a lot like burning in my lungs. I don't have the greatest lungs, and so when you wear masks for long periods of time doing any kind of physical activity, yeah, it sucks. And I don't think it takes anything away from the fact that that's an unpleasant experience, especially for children. To say, like, there is a negative to this. Like, wearing masks has a cost. It has a cost. But does that cost actually outweigh the benefits of wearing them? That's a much more complicated and more important question. And I would say that probably the other point that I thought was most significant that they made was just that these are children, so they don't have like the coping mechanisms and the advanced personalities of adults. A kid in elementary school does need that kind of nonverbal communication. Like, they need to be able to express that they're upset or freaked out or need something or want something. Or
but the same argument can be made about doing school online. The kid's not going to learn the same way either.
Yeah, but at least with the school online, they're definitely not getting COVID. Whereas masks is only a moderate protection against it. So, I mean, between those two, I'd still say online.
Yeah, it kind of put me off of the article, I'll be honest, that so early on, they point out some things that I feel like are kind of disingenuous. Like, they point out as issues that masks bring, the likelihood of getting more acne, or
other really funny ones.
Or also, yeah, like hearing impaired people not being able to see lips and things like that. It's like those things are, I think, a bit misleading when the things like, as you're saying, Alex, questions like for children who might actually have problems breathing, they also mention these things, but to mix those in as if they're equal with things like not socially developing adequately is kind of, I think, just it felt like they were trying to stack.
Yeah, it was spaghetti against the wall, right? They were shotgunning it. It was every possible version of why this could be
There's
a problem.
some really funny dumb ones, though.
Yeah.
Mind if I share? So one, like, kids with glasses. Yeah, I would wear glasses. My glasses get fogged up like crazy. Yeah, that's not a health risk. I just wipe my glasses. All right, second, that's insane. Increased levels of carbon dioxide in the blood. Demonstrably false. Shut the fuck up. Third one, that's stupid. You know how kids are gross and icky? Well, simply having a mask is now going to be a vector for disease. Yeah, the same way that they like shit in their shoes is a vector for disease. That's just called being a kid is being a vector for disease. All right, fourth one, that's the funniest of all. This will wearing masks will cause people to become mouth breathers. Mm-hmm. And everyone hates mouth breathers because apparently, according to some fucking Irish study that's probably bullshit, if you mouth breathe for too long, it alters the shape of your face. It gives you an elongated like cheek and chin, which is amazing. If we give kids masks, don't mouth breathe too long, they'll come out looking like Neanderthals.
They didn't even bother to explain why they're mouth breathing. The mask covers the nose and the mouth equally. It's the same difficulty to breathe through your nose as your mouth with a mask over them both. That doesn't even relate to wearing a mask. So that's not even a point. That one didn't even make sense.
They just take the time to just shit on mouth breathers.
But I mean, to me, there were a lot of warning signs that this
the
article.
most hated population.
There were a lot of warning signs that this article was going to be like kind of playing dirty. I don't necessarily think that that's because they're writing in bad faith. I think it's because they're trying to like create the strongest argument they can by basically using every debating tactic and like misleading thing they can to get their thing they want done. And here's a few that I noticed. For one, they start off by using the premise right in the title. It's abusive to force kids who struggle with masks to sacrifice for the sake of unvaccinated adults, which implies, don't you want to help little Timmy not wear a mask if it means that your evil Republican chud uncle is the only one who gets killed? Because they're the only ones who aren't vaccinated, right? Like it's using this conspiracy right-wing Trump anti-vax like essentially despicable identity that's like canonically evil to justify bad public policy by going, well, hey, the only victims are chuds. And unfortunately, they're not the only victims, because there's lots of people who are unvaccinated for other reasons. There are people who are unvaccinated because there's literally not reliable health in their community. This is especially true internationally, where hardly any of the other countries have vaccines. But even in America, there are communities that are afraid of the vaccine because they're black and they know what Tuskegee is. Like, they're afraid of what the government does to people who participate in it. And that's not quite the same thing as just like, I'm a white supremacist and a sovereign citizen. Like, no, there are people on all sorts of the political spectrum who are afraid of it.
But Alex, to be fair, the largest number of people who don't have the vaccine are people who are anti-vax.
No, of course, but it sublimates them all into the obvious evil target instead of saying this is a very large group of people still who are not vaccinated, or who are vaccinated but are immunocompromised, or for whatever reason could still get it. Like, there are still some breakthrough cases. So this is basically just lumping it all into
Delta throws all this out the water anyway, because Delta can break through vaccines anyway. So it's not for the sake of the children; it's for the sake of everyone.
But right off the bat, saying like we're gonna justify bad public policy by saying, don't worry, it's a demonized group who suffers. That's just bad logic. And it's intentionally misleading, because say like, well, the policy isn't bad as long as you don't care about the things it hurts. Well, I still care if those people die, even if they are chuds. They're still human beings. Like, we shouldn't be articulating a policy that's like, let's kill millions of people because they deserve it. No, sorry, no. That's still bad policy. And that's not even remotely the only one. Like, they also say on one part of the article, there's not enough data yet. As Aiden was referencing to, a lot of this has actually changed, but there's not enough data yet to know whether children transmit these things very well, or whether it's a big risk to children. And then later in the article it goes, all the evidence shows that it doesn't transmit very well and there's no damage to children. Well, which is it?
They choose when they want to use data.
So do we have data or not? Because it feels like when they have data, it's only to serve them, and then suddenly it's missing when it doesn't.
Alex,
serve
the data
them.
only exists that supports me. The data that could support the counter argument, it's inconclusive yet.
The solution that they're proposing, because toward the end of it, they basically say, well, what do they want to do? They want to say mask if you want it, which is like the Obama, like, if you like your mask, you can keep it.
Which is also what got us in trouble in the first place, because not enough people are masked and get vaccine if you want. Not enough people got the vaccine, so we never reached herd immunity. We never got it clamped down, and that's why breakthrough cases exist. That's why variants exist. Because a la carte, mask if you want, vaccine if you want, isn't public policy. That's just opinion. That's just, well, you want to vote D, you want to vote R, whatever. Do whatever you want.
If it isn't a mandate, then you turn the school into a political battleground where individual students get bullied or ridiculed for like the personal choice of how they respond to a pandemic. Like,
it could be either way. They could get bullied for having a mask or bullied for not wearing a mask.
Right. It doesn't even matter which direction. Their kids get bullied all the time for all sorts of stupid shit. This would create like a perfect bullying mechanism. But they
hate politicization, right? They hate politicization. Well, now your kid who's like 5 is getting politicized.
Right. If you don't have a mask on in school, you may as well wear a Trump hat to school. And that, is that a good idea? I'd rather you wear a mask than a Trump hat. Because you're basically saying, please get into conflict with me.
Oh my God, do they sell Trump masks?
Now that's a fucking complicated question, but probably.
That'd be awesome.
But like, it doesn't even address the fundamental question, which is like, okay, there's two possibilities. There is data that suggests that the masks are helpful, or there is data that suggests that the masks are harmful, or I guess you could say there's no data, but there's definitely data. If the masks are helpful, then the only logical response is a mandate that removes that personal responsibility bullshit and makes it a universal public policy that we get the protection of the masks. And if there is data that shows that the masks are not helpful, then the only logical policy is to not only not have a mask mandate, but to strongly discourage students from doing it, because then you're basically sending mixed messages. Otherwise, they're saying like, well, it's kind of good. It's like, no, it's either good or it's not good. So if you can figure out which of those it is, either way, you want a mandate. There's no version of this which is like, it's a little good, maybe, I don't know. Like, figure out what it does and then tell people about it. Because saying like it's up to the individual is kind of like saying, hey, you do the research, figure it out, 6-year-old. Like, no, that's your job.
Figure it out, irresponsible parent.
That's your job as doctors. If politicians and medical community need to be getting together to tell us what the fuck to do, because we don't have advanced degrees in those subjects. We are not in those positions of power. We do not have those communicatory vectors. It is not the responsibility of every kid in middle school to figure out if they should be wearing a mask. That's not their job. Their job is to like go to school and like pee in the right room and like not kill themselves because they're in middle school. Stop giving them extra shit. Alex? Stop giving them all this bullshit to do. They're just kids. Tell them what they need to do so they can do it. It's absurd to put this burden on these people. 56 million kids are gonna fucking go on like Snopes to figure out if they should wear a mask. Like, what the fuck are they talking about?
And maybe hide it from their shitty parents. I mean, once again, it's the same thing with all these teenagers who are like, my parents don't want me to get the vaccine. Should I sneak in with that mustache and nose and glasses to get the vaccine? Like, stop giving children responsibilities. That's why parents exist, to be carers for the children. We can't even get that right anymore in society.
I don't know. It made me really mad because they it's kind of like Icarus. Like they flew too close to the sun. Like they had a few good ideas, and I wanted to enjoy this article, and it always ends up in the same place, which is, you know, you had me in the first half. I'm not gonna lie, but like, no, it only gets dumber as far as I'm concerned. Because like, so the premise of the article is basically articulating an extremely unpopular position, which is that we should not be wearing masks in schools, and this flies directly in the face of the CDC. So to me, now maybe this is my bias, but the burden of proof should be on the article to show several things. First of all, that children are not at high risk of death from COVID if they don't wear masks. Secondly, that they're not at high risk of disability from long COVID if they don't wear masks. And third, that they're not a serious risk of transmitting COVID to their more vulnerable family, friends, and other social contacts if they don't wear masks. Because if any of those three things are significantly improved by masks, then they should fucking wear masks.
And
right?
even if it doesn't affect them, we already have proven what COVID does to adults. So that case has already been made. So Alex, you're exactly right. The burden of proof is on people who say, no, but kids are different. Oh, really?
Right.
How? Why?
And in the article itself, right? So none of these are really definitively demonstrated. So like the thing about like, oh well, kids don't die. Like, all right, that seems to be broadly true because there's only like 250 kids in the U.S. who've ended up in like critical condition, like ventilator hospital shit. And it's like, yeah, sure, but if I said to you,
pneumonia or the flu.
But if I said to you, okay, we could have a bunch of kids uncomfortable wearing masks, or we could just go out and shoot 250 kids. It's like, well, I still say wear the mask, right? Like, is that an acceptable number of preventable deaths? I don't know.
You're not okay with like a terrorist attack on a Russian school, or
right?
something?
Like, I'm not okay with what would basically be one of the largest mass shooting events in the United States, were it to actually happen in one place. No, I don't think I am.
Yeah, but see, Alex, people really care how people die. They don't really care about how many people die. They care about the mechanism by which they die. But see, in this article, they get to not feel bad about the people who die from COVID because their policy prescription is choose to get it or not. So if you choose to wear the mask or you choose to get the vaccine and you're fine, you're fine. If you choose to not wear the mask or choose to not get the vaccine and die, that was on you. This is their way to push the responsibility from the state to the individual. So they don't have to feel bad when you die.
This is the strongest part of the argument, by the way, because kids don't tend to die from this. They have an extremely low death rate. And even then, it's still, in my mind, too many children dying of something you could have prevented. But let's look at the real problem. They massively misrepresent the risk of long COVID. And the article literally says, almost all children had symptom resolution by 8 weeks, providing reassurance about that. But then if you look at the statement on this exact topic by the American Association of Pediatrics, quote, at this time, it appears that severe illness due to COVID-19 is uncommon among children. However, there is an urgent need to collect more data on the longer-term impacts of the pandemic on children, including the many ways that the virus can long-term harm the physical health of the infected children, as well as the emotional and mental health effects. In other words, we don't know, because it has not been long enough to know whether all of these kids, of which there have been a lot, getting long-term COVID, are going to be as crippled as the adults getting long-term
And according
COVID.
to the article, the psychological damage is de facto worse than the physical
Right.
damage.
Right.
So we may as well save their psyche rather than save their bodies.
Because they've been, the article makes it seem as though, oh, kids don't get COVID, and when they do, it's no big deal. Okay, from that pediatric website, 4,413,547 children have contracted COVID just in the United States, and just enough that we even noticed, which means plenty more probably had unsymptomatic and didn't get tested. And that represents almost 14.5% of all cases. So that's not insignificant at all. Like, if they were making the argument like, oh, kids don't get it, it should be like 1 or 2%. It should be a tiny percentage of the total people getting COVID. They're getting it at a very similar rate to the general population, all things considered. That's not bearing out the premise of the article that children don't get COVID, and when they do get COVID, it's not that bad. We don't know if it's that bad because we don't have enough time, and they're clearly getting it. In just the last week, there were 121,000 child COVID cases just in the United States. Do we know that all those kids are not going to develop any long-term consequences from any of this? With the amount of data that we've gathered in like a year, maybe, on what long-term consequences come from this? There's no fucking way we could know that. No one could know that. That's like an article of faith. Right? And then, to me, the most absurd one of all is the premise that, oh no, they don't pose a risk to their family, friends, and other things. There have been 30 million COVID cases in the United States. Are you telling me that we have contact traced with like the full force of a background check 30 million COVID cases, and every person that each of those 30 million people got in contact with to determine with certainty that it is not because children are spreading it to them?
Also, you can't make the argument that children are vectors for disease and say they're not vectors for COVID. You can't have it both ways. Either
Right.
kids are gross and slimy and icky and give you the flu every time they shit their pants, or they don't.
And in case that very basic logical assertion that I was just making about how the fuck could we know the kids don't get them COVID, turns out we do know they can get COVID and transmit it. Once again, CDC quote, children and adolescents can be infected with SARS-CoV-2. They can get sick with COVID-19. They can spread the virus to others. In the United States, through March 2021, the cumulative estimated rates of SARS-CoV-2 infection and COVID-19 symptomatic illness in children ages 5 to 17 years were comparable to infection and symptomatic illness rates in adults ages 18 to 49, and higher than rates in adults ages 50 to 6 or older. Estimated cumulative rates of infection and symptomatic illness in children 0 to 4 were only about half. But basically, what they're saying is children are really no different than adults in the rate that we see them contracting the disease and spreading the disease. So from the only data that we actually have, from the only reputable sources that we basically have to quote, there is zero evidence that children cannot contract the disease and therefore transmit the disease to the people who are dying of the disease. And when you cram hundreds to thousands of children into a tiny indoors confined space and don't give them masks, you are basically saying, come kill your grandpa. Because that's what that is. You are all but guaranteeing that every one of those kids gets COVID. Because COVID spreads like wildfire in close quarters where everyone's breathing the same air. And in almost every case where there's been like a summer camp that didn't require masks and let people in, or a school that opened that didn't require masks and let people in, it turns out like everyone got it. Because when you basically created the conditions for perfect.
You know what's happening right now at after Obama's 60th birthday party. I don't know if anyone from his party tested positive, but in the area, there are a whole huge shoot up in positive COVID cases because of all the people coming in. So, like, this happens at fucking birthday parties. It's going to happen in schools. It already did last year.
It's wild to me that this article does not even try to speak to this point, which is well established by like every other agency about the fact that kids are well known to transmit the disease, and that all the people who they will come into contact with who are not under 17 and therefore unlikely to have long-term health consequences or die, even according to their logic, which isn't seemingly even correct, will just get it and die. So what is their excuse for like killing all those people? They're chuds? Is that enough?
All right, kid. If you have a grandpa, who's gonna give a big inheritance. Go get COVID. Go kill your grandpa. You won't be blamed for it because you'll just be like, "Oh, he got COVID. Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
no." And
Oops, the grandpa changed his will to building the border wall because he's a child.
he donated all his money to a Trump scam.
Yeah, get fucked. Like, I guess.
All right, Aiden, what do you think? We've mostly been shouting. What's your tempered take on things? Oh no!
Oh, that's sorry to hear that. Well,
Aiden is experiencing technical difficulties, so we will.
folks, you hate to
I
see
just
it.
want to interrupt any rant with
Yeah.
something that was about to be cut off.
I was going to do my best impression. All right, well, folks, we've discussed it. We've given our take. We still encourage you to read these articles, especially ones we do a deep dive on because we've also read them. And we'd be curious to hear what you guys think. Yeah.
If nothing else, we've shown you the danger both of reading just headlines and of subjecting yourself to full articles. So really, you need to decide for yourself what level of risk you will tolerate in the pandemic of bad information.
Go become an epiphenomenalist.
But that's an individual choice. Yeah, it's an individual choice and not a mandate. So we leave it to your decision making.
Yeah, we can't be blamed for writing the zombie movie that gets your uncle to hate vaccines. Okay?
Thanks for sticking with us on this super long episode, and we will see you next time.
Bye now.
Adios.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoy what we do here at the Non-Essential Workers Podcast and you want to support us, please check us out at patreon.com/non-essential-workers-podcast or by clicking the link below.
For $5, you get access to the Patreon feed and twice as many total episodes.
How many more?
I'll say it one more time for the back. Twice. Anyways, thanks and see you next time.